Hello everyone.
About 70% of the friends who watch my videos are not subscribed, and I would be very happy if you did.
I know many of you use these videos to fall asleep, so before you drift off, I'd love it if you could leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from around the world. Story 1. It was a typical evening, working late at the office to finish up reports that had been looming over me for days. The floor was nearly empty, just a few lights on here and there, casting long shadows against the walls. I liked the silence, the way the building seemed to breathe softly once everyone else had gone home. It gave me space to think, to move through tasks without interruption. The clock on my computer screen glowed 9:45 p.m. when everything changed. The shrill wail of the fire alarm cut through the silence like a knife. I jumped, heart pounding, paper slipping from my hands. For a moment I just sat there, frozen, trying to process what was happening. The alarm continued to blare, insistent and loud, urging immediate action. I grabbed my bag and coat and made for the stairwell, my mind running through the emergency protocols we had all been trained to follow. When I reached the stairwell door, I pushed the bar to open it, but it did not budge. I pushed harder, panic beginning to edge into my mind. It was supposed to swing open easily in case of emergencies, but it was stuck, unmoving. I jiggled the handle, slammed my shoulder against it, but nothing worked. The fire alarm was deafening now, echoing off the hard surfaces, making it difficult to think clearly. I turned and sprinted to the next stairwell at the opposite end of the hallway. Maybe it was just that door. Maybe this one would work. My shoes slapped against the tile floor as I ran, the sound of my breathing almost drowned out by the relentless alarm. When I reached the second stairwell and pushed the door, the same thing happened. It would not open, sealed shut as if bolted from the other side. My hands started to shake as I backed away from the door. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. The fire alarms were supposed to unlock the doors automatically, allow people to exit safely. I thought about calling 911, but when I pulled out my phone, there was no signal. The building's thick walls sometimes messed with reception, but this felt deliberate, like I was trapped. I tried the elevators next, even though we had been told never to use them during a fire. Desperation pushed me toward them, pressing the button repeatedly, but nothing happened. The elevator doors stayed stubbornly closed, the lights above them dark. I looked around wildly, searching for another way out, another solution, but all the offices were empty, the windows too high and narrow to climb through. Smoke started to drift into the hallway, thin at first, curling around the ceiling like ghostly fingers. My throat tightened, and I pulled my coat over my mouth, trying to breathe through the fabric. The fire had to be real. I could smell the acrid, bitter stench of burning plastic and wood. Fear tightened its grip on me, but I forced myself to stay calm, to think. I ducked into one of the offices and slammed the door shut behind me. Under the desk, I found a landline phone and lifted the receiver with trembling fingers. I dialed 911, praying the call would go through. It did, and I quickly explained the situation, giving them the address and my location within the building. The dispatcher kept a calm voice, telling me to stay where I was and that help was on the way. 3 minutes dragged by like hours. The smoke thickened in the hallway, seeping through the cracks around the door. My eyes burned and it became harder to breathe even with the coat over my mouth. I stayed low to the ground, remembering the safety tips from fire drills, hoping it would make a difference. I could hear distant, banging sounds, shouting, maybe firefighters breaking into the building. I thought about my family, about how this could be the last time I ever sat in an office chair or breathed cool night air. I refused to give up, refused to let panic take me under. I crawled to the window and pounded on it with a chair, hoping to get someone's attention from outside. The glass was thick, not designed to shatter easily, but after several hard hits, cracks spider-webbed across it. A loud crash echoed from the hallway, and then I heard heavy footsteps and someone calling out. I shouted back, hoarse from the smoke, pounding harder on the door. The footsteps grew louder until they were right outside. I heard a metallic scraping noise. Then the door was forced open with a crowbar by 2 firefighters in full gear. Relief flooded through me as they rushed in, covering me with a blanket and guiding me out. The hallway was nearly invisible through the smoke, but they moved quickly and surely. They led me down a different stairwell, one they had already forced open. The fresh air outside hit me like a wave, and I staggered, coughing and blinking against the floodlights the emergency crews had set up. Paramedics checked me over, wrapping me in another blanket and giving me oxygen. As I sat there, shivering and dazed, the fire chief came over to talk to me. He explained that the fire had been small, started by a faulty electrical panel, but the real concern was why the stairwell doors had been locked. That was not supposed to happen. He said an investigation was already underway to figure out who had tampered with the systems. Days later, the truth came out. Someone had deliberately disabled the emergency door releases in the elevator systems, setting off the fire alarm as a distraction. It was part of a larger plan to steal sensitive information from a secured floor, knowing the fire would evacuate the building. What they had not counted on was me staying late that night. The authorities caught them quickly thanks to security footage and access logs. I went back to work eventually, though it took time to feel comfortable staying late again. The company installed new safety measures, upgrading all the systems and ensuring nothing like that could ever happen again. They offered me counseling, extra vacation days, even a promotion for my bravery and calm under pressure. I accepted, feeling stronger and more resilient because of the experience. Life slowly returned to normal, but I never forgot that night. I learned how quickly things could turn from ordinary to terrifying, and how important it was to stay calm under pressure. I also learned that sometimes bad things happen, but with the right people and a little bit of courage, it is possible to make it through. I carried that lesson with me every day after, grateful for every quiet evening and every simple, uneventful night. Story 2. I had been feeling stuck for months, unable to move forward with anything in my life. When I saw the ad for a self-help seminar promising clarity and transformation, it felt like exactly what I needed. The price was steep, but I justified it by telling myself it was an investment in my future. I signed up without thinking twice, eager for something to break the cycle I was trapped in. The seminar was scheduled for a full weekend, and I cleared my calendar to attend. The event was held in a sleek hotel conference room, decorated with motivational posters and banners. Rows of chairs were filled with people who seemed just as desperate for change as I was. There was a strange energy in the air, a mixture of excitement and nervousness. I took a seat near the middle, hoping to blend in without drawing too much attention. A loud, upbeat song blared from the speakers as the seminar leader bounded onto the stage. He was charismatic, confident, and everything I wished I could be. His words poured out in a steady stream of inspiration, and for the first hour, I found myself completely captivated. He talked about taking control of our lives, breaking free from fear, and becoming the best versions of ourselves. The audience around me clapped and cheered enthusiastically. I felt hopeful, like maybe I had made the right choice after all. Then the tone began to shift. The speaker started talking about how we had been sabotaging our own lives, that we were our own worst enemies. His voice grew louder and sharper, accusing us of being lazy, weak, and foolish. I felt a lump form in my throat, but I clapped along with everyone else, not wanting to stand out. The room felt less like a supportive environment and more like a courtroom. By the second session, things became even stranger. We were told to stand and shout out our biggest failures while others watched. People sobbed and screamed as they confessed their secrets to a room full of strangers. I hesitated, feeling exposed and vulnerable, but peer pressure was strong. I mumbled something just to get through it, my face burning with shame. We were not allowed to leave the room except during tightly controlled breaks. The doors were guarded by staff members who smiled too widely and watched everyone closely. I noticed how they discouraged private conversations, steering people back into group activities if they tried to talk alone. Every exercise was designed to break us down emotionally and then rebuild us in the image the seminar promoted. At one point, we were asked to write down the names of people in our lives who had held us back. We were told to imagine cutting them out completely, severing ties with anyone who did not fully support our new path. It felt extreme and isolating. I thought of my family, my friends, people who loved me even when I struggled. I kept my paper blank, unwilling to betray them, even in a pretend exercise. The speaker introduced the concept of financial commitment as proof of dedication. They pressured us to sign up for even more expensive workshops, claiming that if we hesitated, it meant we were not truly ready to change. Some people rushed to the back of the room to hand over their credit cards. I sat frozen in my seat, my heart pounding. Something about it felt deeply wrong. That night, I could not sleep. I lay in my hotel bed replaying the day in my mind, feeling more trapped than empowered. I realized how easily they had manipulated my emotions, how they had used fear and shame to control the group. I thought about leaving but worried about drawing attention to myself. They had made it clear that quitting meant failure. The next morning, I forced myself to go back, hoping to find a way out without causing a scene. The sessions resumed with more intense emotional drills, more shouting, more tears. I kept my head down, participating just enough to avoid scrutiny. My stomach churned with anxiety. I felt like a prisoner in a place that had promised healing. During a short break, I slipped into a side hallway, pretending I needed the restroom. I found an emergency exit door at the end of the hall. It was alarmed, but I decided it was worth it. I pushed the bar and ran as the alarm blared through the hotel. I did not look back. My only focus was getting as far away from that place as possible. I ran across the parking lot and flagged down a taxi. The driver gave me a curious look, but said nothing as I gave him my address. I sat in the back seat shaking, my hands clenched tightly in my lap. Relief flooded through me as the hotel faded into the distance. I knew I had narrowly escaped something dangerous. Back at home, I spent hours researching the seminar and its organizers. I discovered horror stories from others who had attended similar events. Some had gone into debt, lost friends and family, or suffered emotional breakdowns. The pattern was always the same: break them down, isolate them, and bleed them dry. I felt a deep sense of betrayal, but also a strange pride. I had recognized the danger before it was too late. I had trusted my instincts and saved myself. I promised never to ignore my gut feelings again, no matter how much pressure I felt. The experience taught me a hard but valuable lesson about protecting my mind and heart. In the weeks that followed, I worked to rebuild my confidence on my own terms. I read books by respected psychologists, joined a small support group at a local community center, and practiced setting boundaries. I learned that real growth came slowly through patience and self-compassion, not through fear and humiliation. I never sought a quick fix again. Whenever I felt the urge to look for easy answers, I reminded myself of the hotel conference room, the shouting, the manipulation. I remembered how good it had felt to push open that door and run. Freedom, I realized, was something I had to fight for. Over time, I found peace within myself. I built a life based on small, steady steps instead of grand promises. I surrounded myself with people who accepted me as I was, not as someone they wanted to mold. I learned that true change was quiet, steady, and deeply personal. Looking back, I was grateful for the experience, painful as it had been. It had sharpened my awareness, taught me resilience, and shown me the strength I never knew I had. I had walked into a trap and walked out stronger. I knew now that my life was mine to shape, one careful step at a time. Story 3. It started subtly enough that I almost did not notice it at first. I would be on a call and there would be a faint clicking sound in the background, almost like someone tapping a pen on a desk. At first, I thought it was just interference, or maybe an issue with my phone. The calls would drop unexpectedly, or the audio would cut in and out for a second or two. It was strange, but not enough to alarm me immediately. Over the next few days, the clicking became more pronounced. Sometimes it would happen even when I was not on a call, just as the phone sat on the table beside me. I would pick it up to check for notifications and hear the faint series of clicks, like a distant typewriter. It unsettled me, but I tried to reason with myself. Maybe it was a glitch or something related to the network. Then people I knew started mentioning odd calls they had received. A coworker told me they got a missed call from my number, but when they answered, no one spoke. A family member said they received a text from me that made no sense, a jumbled series of words and numbers. I had no memory of sending anything like that. I checked my messages and call logs, but everything looked normal on my end. The more I paid attention, the more inconsistencies I found. My battery drained unusually fast even when I barely used the phone. Apps would close randomly, and sometimes my phone would restart itself without warning. Late at night, I would hear that same clicking noise and feel a growing sense of unease. It was like my phone had a life of its own, moving in ways I could not control. I decided to dig a little deeper. I searched online for what clicking noises during calls could mean, and almost immediately, results mentioning surveillance and phone tapping came up. I read story after story of people describing experiences eerily similar to mine. Some mentioned that their numbers had been cloned, used by others to make calls and send messages without their knowledge. My stomach dropped as I read about the dangers involved. Determined to find answers, I contacted my phone service provider. I explained everything, from the clicking sounds to the strange reports from my contacts. The representative listened carefully, and then asked me a series of questions. After a few minutes, they confirmed my worst fear. My number had likely been cloned. Someone had duplicated my phone number and was using it for their own purposes. Hearing that out loud made my chest tighten with anxiety. I asked what I could do to fix it, and they walked me through several steps. I had to change my account passwords immediately, add extra security measures to my account, and request a new SIM card with a different number. They also recommended filing a report with the authorities since phone cloning could be linked to identity theft and other serious crimes. I spent the rest of that day securing my information. I updated every account linked to my phone number, from banking to social media. I enabled two-factor authentication wherever I could. It felt overwhelming, like I was trying to plug leaks in a sinking ship. Every time I thought I was done, I remembered another account or service that needed to be updated. Replacing my SIM card brought some relief. The strange clicks stopped, and no more odd calls or messages were reported by my contacts. But I still felt shaken, like a part of my life had been invaded. I kept thinking about who might have done it and why. Was it random, or had someone targeted me specifically for some reason? Those questions circled my mind late at night when the house was quiet. The experience made me hyper-aware of my digital security. I started reading articles and watching videos about protecting personal information online. I learned how easy it could be for someone to gather enough details about a person to clone their number or worse. Simple habits like using the same password across multiple sites or sharing too much information on social media could open the door to those risks. Determined not to be caught off guard again, I made several changes to my routine. I created strong, unique passwords for every account and stored them securely. I limited the amount of personal information I shared publicly. I also kept a closer eye on my phone bills, looking for any unusual activity. I refused to live in fear, but I would not be naive either. There were moments when I still felt a flicker of paranoia. If a call dropped unexpectedly or an app acted strange, I would tense up, wondering if it was happening again. But those moments became less frequent over time. I reminded myself that I had taken control of the situation, that I was doing everything possible to protect myself. But I also learned how important it was to trust my instincts. The clicking sounds, the odd behavior of my phone, the strange calls reported by friends, all of it had pointed to something being wrong. If I had ignored those signs, the damage could have been much worse. Listening to that inner voice, even when it seemed small and uncertain, had made all the difference. Eventually, life returned to normal. My phone worked as it should, and the fear that had gripped me slowly faded. I stayed cautious but did not let the experience dominate my thoughts. It became a lesson I carried with me, a reminder of the world we live in and the importance of staying vigilant. Or bad things could happen, but with the right actions they could be managed and overcome. Looking back, I felt proud of how I handled everything. I did not let fear paralyze me. I sought help, took action, and made changes to protect myself. It would have been easy to panic or pretend nothing was wrong, but facing the problem head-on gave me a sense of strength. The situation had been frightening and invasive, but it did not break me. In a strange way, the experience gave me more confidence. I knew I could handle unexpected challenges and protect what mattered to me. I learned that even when things go wrong, even when it feels like someone has reached into your life without permission, it is possible to fight back and win. I reclaimed my peace, my security, and my trust in myself, one careful step at a time. Story 4. I had been searching for a mattress for a few weeks, trying to find something decent without spending too much money. Buying brand new was out of my budget, so I turned to Facebook Marketplace. It did not take long before I found a listing that seemed perfect. The pictures showed a clean mattress, barely used according to the description, and the price was almost too good to be true. After a short conversation with the seller, I arranged to pick it up that afternoon. The seller lived on the other side of town, in a quiet neighborhood lined with trees and modest houses. When I arrived, they were waiting outside, the mattress propped up against their garage. It looked just like the photos, and they assured me it had been barely used and kept in a clean, smoke-free home. I inspected it quickly but thoroughly, finding no stains or obvious damage. Satisfied, I handed over the cash, loaded it into my car, and headed home. Getting the mattress inside was a bit of a struggle, but after some effort I managed to wrestle it up the stairs and into my bedroom. It felt good to finally have something comfortable to sleep on after weeks of using an old couch. That night I made up the bed with fresh sheets and looked forward to a peaceful sleep. As I settled in, I noticed the mattress felt a little firmer than I expected, but I brushed it off as something I would get used to. The next morning I woke up with a strange feeling in my side. It was not exactly painful, but it was uncomfortable, like something was pressing against me. I pulled back the sheets and ran my hand across the mattress, trying to find the source. There was a small, raised bump near the center, almost like something was stitched into the fabric. Curious, I pressed on it and felt something hard and sharp beneath the surface. A wave of unease washed over me. Mattresses were not supposed to have anything hard inside them, at least not in such a concentrated spot. I debated whether to ignore it or investigate further. Eventually, curiosity got the better of me. I grabbed a pair of scissors and carefully snipped at the stitching around the bump, trying not to damage the mattress too much. As I pulled the fabric apart, something metallic glinted in the light. I reached in and carefully extracted a small, jagged piece of metal. It looked like a broken piece of a blade, sharp and rusted at the edges. My heart pounded as I examined it, wondering how something so dangerous had ended up inside a mattress. I kept digging, my fingers trembling slightly, and pulled out 2 more sharp fragments. It was horrifying to think about how easily I could have been seriously injured. One wrong move in my sleep, and I could have ended up in the hospital. I sat back on my heels, staring at the pieces of metal lying on the floor. I considered calling the seller, but deep down I knew it would not make a difference. Whether it had been an accident or something more sinister, I could not trust anything they said. For a moment I thought about throwing the mattress away and cutting my losses. It felt tainted now, unsafe, but I hated the idea of wasting the money I had spent, especially after how tight things had been financially. I decided instead to strip the mattress completely, carefully cutting it open and inspecting every inch. If there were more hidden dangers, I needed to find them. It took hours, but I was thorough. I found 2 more pieces of metal sewn into different parts of the mattress, each as sharp and rusted as the first ones. By the time I finished, the mattress looked like a patchwork of cuts and repairs, but I was confident it was finally safe. I rest-stitched the fabric as best as I could and covered it with a thick mattress protector before putting the sheets back on. That night I slept more soundly, but the experience left a deep mark on me. I kept thinking about what could have happened if I had not investigated. I imagined waking up in the middle of the night with a deep cut or worse. It was a sobering reminder that not everyone or everything you find online is as it seems. From then on, I promised myself to be much more cautious with second-hand purchases. In the following days, I found myself checking the mattress obsessively before going to bed. Even though I had thoroughly inspected it, a small part of me remained anxious. Over time, though, the fear faded, replaced by a cautious kind of confidence. I knew I had taken the right steps to protect myself. I had turned a dangerous situation into a lesson learned without letting it destroy my trust in my own judgment. Eventually, I got used to the mattress and even grew to like it. It was firm but supportive, and I slept better than I had in months. Life settled back into a normal rhythm, and the strange incident became just another story tucked away in my mind. I shared it with a few friends, warning them to always check what they buy and never assume something is safe just because it looks clean or comes with a smile. Looking back, I was grateful I had listened to my instincts. If I had ignored the strange feeling or brushed off the discomfort, things could have ended much differently. It reminded me that intuition is a powerful tool, something to be respected and trusted. Not every danger announces itself loudly. Sometimes it hides just beneath the surface, waiting for you to find it. That mattress stayed with me for years afterward. Every time I lay down, I felt a strange sense of pride knowing that I had made it safe with my own hands. It served as a daily reminder that I was capable of taking care of myself, even when the unexpected happened. I never let fear take over, but I never forgot the lesson either. From then on, whenever I bought something secondhand, I inspected it carefully and trusted my instincts without question. In the end, the experience made me stronger and more aware. It showed me that even when things seem fine on the outside, it is always worth digging a little deeper. It is not about being paranoid. It is about being smart, cautious, and looking out for yourself in a world where not everyone does. I moved forward with a little more wisdom and a lot more trust in my ability to handle whatever came my way. Story 5. It was just an ordinary afternoon when I noticed someone standing near the bus stop looking confused. They kept glancing at their phone and then up at the street signs, clearly unsure of where to go. I felt a little tug of sympathy and decided to walk over and ask if they needed help. They smiled in relief when I offered and quickly explained that they were trying to find a specific address but could not seem to figure out the directions. Pulling up the map on my phone, I showed them the easiest route and even pointed out some landmarks they would pass along the way. They thanked me several times, their smile wide and appreciative. I waved it off, saying it was no trouble at all, and watched as they headed off in the right direction. I thought nothing more of it after that. Helping strangers always felt like the right thing to do, and I never expected anything in return. The rest of my afternoon was uneventful, filled with errands and a quiet dinner at home. A few days later, while scrolling through a community group online, I saw a post that caught my eye. Someone had shared a story about a kind stranger helping them when they were lost. Curious, I clicked on the post, wondering if maybe it was the same person I had helped. But what I saw next made my stomach turn. There in the comments was a screenshot of a private message thread with my photo attached to it. The photo was clearly taken that afternoon near the bus stop. I recognized the jacket I had been wearing and the way I was pointing at the map on my phone. The angle made it obvious it had been taken secretly. The caption under the photo was unsettling, filled with comments about me, none of which I ever wanted to see. My face, my simple act of kindness, had been twisted into something I did not recognize. For a few minutes I just stared at the screen, not sure how to react. Part of me felt angry, part of me felt violated, and another part felt deeply embarrassed. I had trusted that my good deed would be just that, a good deed. It never crossed my mind that someone would take a photo without my consent and share it online. I quickly closed the post and sat back, feeling like the walls around me were suddenly much closer. I debated what to do next. Reporting the post seemed like the obvious choice, but I also wondered if it would make things worse. What if drawing attention to it just encouraged more people to look at it? My heart raced as I considered my options. I decided to take screenshots of the post and the comments just in case I needed evidence later. After saving everything, I reached out to the group moderator. I explained the situation calmly, providing the screenshots and asking if they could remove the post and address the behavior. The moderator responded quickly, expressing sincere apologies and promising to take immediate action. Within an hour, the post was taken down, and the person who shared it was banned from the group. Even though the post was gone, I still felt unsettled. The idea that someone had seen me, interacted with me, and then decided to secretly document it for their own amusement was deeply disturbing. I realized how vulnerable one moment of kindness had made me. It made me rethink how I approached helping strangers and how cautious I needed to be moving forward. Trust was something that could no longer be given so freely. To clear my mind, I decided to spend the next day outdoors, away from screens and social media. I packed a small bag with water and snacks and headed to a nearby hiking trail. The fresh air and the steady rhythm of my footsteps helped ease the tension in my chest. Every so often, I would pass other hikers, exchanging polite nods without lingering too long. It felt good to be anonymous again, just another face in the crowd. As I walked, I thought about the lesson this experience had taught me. Kindness was still important, but I needed to be mindful of my surroundings and my safety. There was nothing wrong with helping others, but there was also nothing wrong with protecting myself. Trust had to be balanced with caution, especially in a world where not everyone had good intentions. It was a hard truth to accept, but it was necessary. When I got home that evening, I felt lighter, more at peace with what had happened. I made a conscious decision not to let fear control me. Helping that lost person had still been the right thing to do. What they chose to do afterward was a reflection of them, not of me. I could not let one bad experience steal the good from all the other times I had reached out and made a difference. I updated my social media settings, tightening privacy controls and being more selective about what I shared and with whom. I also joined a new online community that prioritized safety and respect among its members. It felt good to be part of a space that valued kindness without exploiting it. But I realized that while I could not control the actions of others, I could control how I responded and where I chose to invest my time and energy. In the weeks that followed, life returned to normal. I still helped people when I could, but I was more aware, more discerning. I trusted my instincts and paid closer attention to red flags. There was a strength in that awareness, a quiet power that came from experience. I knew I would never be as naive as I once was, but I also knew that my heart remained open. One afternoon, months later, I saw another person at a different bus stop looking lost. I hesitated for a moment, old fears trying to creep back in. But then I took a breath, smiled, and approached them. This time I was a little more cautious, keeping a healthy distance and making sure everything felt safe. They were grateful, and after a brief exchange of directions, we went our separate ways. Walking away, I felt a sense of pride. I had not let fear win. I had found a way to hold on to my kindness without sacrificing my sense of security. That balance was something I would carry with me always, a quiet reminder that good deeds are never wasted, even when the world tries to twist them. In the end, the choice to remain kind was mine, and no one could take that away from me. Story 6. Walking to work every morning had become part of my daily routine. I liked the rhythm of it, the predictable path through the neighborhood, the way the air smelled crisp and clean in the early hours. It gave me time to wake up, to clear my mind before the day started. Most of the time I would see the same people, the same cars, the same little changes around the neighborhood. It was comforting in a way, like the world was moving at a steady pace I could depend on. It was a Wednesday when I first noticed the car. It was an older model sedan, dark blue, parked a few houses down from my apartment. At first I thought nothing of it. People parked in that spot all the time. Maybe someone visiting a neighbor, maybe someone new who had just moved in. I barely gave it a second thought as I passed by, focusing instead on getting to work on time. The next morning, the same car was there again. Same spot, same angle, nothing outwardly strange. Still, something about it tugged at my attention. Maybe it was the way the windows were tinted just a little too dark, or the fact that it had not moved overnight. I brushed it off once more, telling myself I was being paranoid. It was a busy neighborhood. Cars came and went all the time. By Friday, I started to feel uneasy. The car was parked in a different spot, further down the street, but still along my walking route. When I looked closer, I noticed the license plate was different from the one I had seen earlier in the week. That struck me as odd. I told myself there could be a reasonable explanation, maybe a mistake, maybe my memory playing tricks on me. Still, a tight feeling settled in my chest as I walked past. The following Monday, the car was back, once again in a new location along my route. This time, it was parked near the corner where I crossed into the next neighborhood. Another new plate. I was sure of it now. I had no idea why someone would be switching plates on a car, but it could not be for anything good. I tried not to stare as I passed, pretending not to notice, even though my heart pounded heavily in my chest. Throughout that day at work, I could not stop thinking about the car. It sat in the back of my mind like a splinter, small but persistent. Every time I pictured it, that uneasy feeling returned. When it was time to go home, I considered taking a different route but decided against it. I told myself it was probably nothing, that changing my habits would only feed my imagination. But still, I kept my phone in my hand, ready to call for help if needed. As I approached the usual stretch where the car had been parked, I glanced around carefully. It was gone. Relief flooded through me for a moment, but it quickly turned to suspicion. Maybe whoever it was had noticed me noticing them. Maybe they were simply moving around to stay hidden. Either way, I quickened my pace and did not relax until I was safely inside my apartment. That night I barely slept. Every creak of the building made me jump. Every passing car made me sit up and listen. I checked the locks on my doors and windows more times than I could count. By morning I was exhausted but determined not to let fear control me. I decided to be more alert, to trust my instincts, but not to panic. I would pay attention, gather information, and figure out what to do if things escalated. Tuesday morning I stepped outside and scanned the street immediately. The car was there again, this time across from my building. It was the same dark blue sedan, but yet another set of plates. Whoever was behind this was being careful, changing details to avoid detection. I pretended not to notice and kept walking, but I snapped a quick photo of the car with my phone when I was safely a few blocks away. At work, I debated what to do. Reporting it to the police seemed like the smart choice, but I worried they would not take me seriously. After all, the car had not done anything illegal that I could prove, at least not directly. Changing plates was suspicious, but without hard evidence of wrongdoing, it might not be enough. Still, I saved the photos and wrote down everything I remembered, just in case. That afternoon, I left work a little early, hoping to catch the car in action. I took a different route home, but circled back toward my street from another direction. Sure enough, the sedan was parked a few blocks away, engine running, someone sitting in the driver's seat. From a distance, I could not make out any features. but I could see the silhouette of a figure watching the street. I called the non-emergency police line and explained everything, from the changing plates to the suspicious behavior. They took my report seriously, which surprised me. An officer was dispatched to check it out. I waited nearby, hidden behind a row of parked cars, watching as the patrol car approached the sedan. The driver immediately pulled away, tires screeching as they sped off down the street. The officer gave chase, and I stood there trembling, feeling both exposed and relieved. I had done the right thing. I stayed there until a second officer arrived and took my statement. They assured me they would investigate and advised me to be cautious in the meantime. They promised to increase patrols around my neighborhood and told me to call 911 if I saw anything suspicious again. But over the next few days, the car did not return. I kept a close eye on my surroundings, always scanning for anything out of place. True to their word, police cars passed by my building more frequently, their presence reassuring in a way I had never fully appreciated before. Slowly, the tension that had gripped me began to ease. A week later, I received a call from a detective following up on my report. They had identified the car and the driver. It turned out the person had a history of stalking and harassment and was already wanted in connection with similar cases in other neighborhoods. Thanks to the information I provided, they were able to locate and arrest him. Hearing that was like a weight lifting off my chest. Knowing that I had listened to my instincts and acted on them filled me with a deep sense of pride. It would have been easy to ignore the signs, to dismiss the uncomfortable feelings as paranoia. Instead, I paid attention, took action, and possibly prevented something much worse from happening. It was a lesson I would carry with me forever. I resumed my morning walks eventually, though I stayed vigilant. Life returned to a new kind of normal, one where I trusted myself more and valued my own safety above convenience or routine. Every time I set out on my familiar path, I did so with a renewed sense of confidence. I had faced something frightening and come through stronger on the other side. The neighborhood felt safe again, but not because I believed nothing bad could ever happen. It felt safe because I knew that I could trust myself to recognize danger and act to protect myself, or that knowledge made all the difference. As I walked past the familiar houses, past the parked cars and friendly faces, I felt a deep gratitude for the ordinary peace I had fought to keep. Story 7. It had been a long day of running errands across town, and I was exhausted by the time I stopped at the shopping center. My feet ached from walking, and I decided to find a restroom before continuing with the last few things on my list. The mall was bustling with people, loud chatter echoing through the hallways as kids darted between stores. I spotted the public restroom near the food court and made my way toward it. The bright fluorescent lights buzzed faintly as I pushed open the heavy door. The restroom was surprisingly empty, with only a faint drip of water echoing from one of the sinks. I chose a stall near the end, wanting a bit of space away from the door. As I closed the stall door behind me, something caught my eye. There, carved into the door at eye level, was my full name. My stomach dropped, and I stared at it in disbelief, tracing the rough edges of the letters with my gaze. For a moment I could not move, frozen by the sudden surge of fear that flooded my chest. How could my name be here, scratched into a random restroom door in a place I had never even visited before today? I had never told anyone I was coming to this mall, and I had no enemies that I knew of. My mind raced through possibilities, each one more unsettling than the last. I took a shaky breath and forced myself to stay calm. I stepped out of the stall and quickly scanned the restroom, but it was still empty. I pulled out my phone and snapped a quick photo of the carving, not sure yet if I would need proof of it. My hands trembled slightly as I tucked my phone away and hurried out of the restroom. The moment I was back in the bustling mall, the normalcy of the crowd almost made me doubt what I had just seen. Almost. No. I found a bench near the center of the mall and sat down, trying to think logically. Maybe it was a coincidence, someone with the same name, although that seemed unlikely given how uncommon my full name was. Maybe it had been there for a long time and had nothing to do with me at all. But deep down I felt it was not random. Something about the precision of the carving made it feel deliberate. I thought about the past few weeks, trying to remember if anything else had seemed unusual. There had been a few strange phone calls, heavy breathing on the other end before hanging up. A few times I had felt like someone was watching me, though when I turned around there was no one there. At the time I brushed it off as paranoia. Now it did not feel like coincidence anymore. I debated whether to call someone, maybe the mall security or even the police. The part of me worried I would not be taken seriously, that it would be dismissed as a prank. I decided to start by speaking with mall security, just to report what I found. It felt better than doing nothing, and if something more serious happened later, there would at least be a record of it. The security office was tucked behind a row of stores, and a bored-looking guard listened as I explained what had happened. I showed him the photo, and to my surprise, his expression grew serious. He asked me to lead him to the restroom so he could see it for himself. We made our way back, weaving through shoppers and children with balloons, the normal scene feeling surreal after what I had discovered. Inside the restroom, the carving was still there, stark and unmistakable against the dull surface of the door. The guard examined it closely, taking photos with his own phone. He told me they would check security footage to see if they could spot anyone acting suspiciously near the restroom earlier. I thanked him, feeling a little reassured that someone was taking me seriously. Still, the unease in my stomach did not go away. I left the mall quickly after that, glancing over my shoulder more often than usual. Every stranger felt like a potential threat. Every glance in my direction made my skin crawl. When I got home, I checked the locks on all the doors and windows twice. I even pulled the curtains closed, something I rarely did during the day. My apartment, usually a place of comfort, now felt vulnerable. That night, sleep was almost impossible. Every creak of the building, every gust of wind against the windows made my heart race. I kept thinking about who could have done it, and more importantly, why. What did they want from me? Was it a warning, a threat, or something else entirely? I could not shake the feeling that someone had been watching me for a long time. The next day, mall security called to update me. They had reviewed footage from the day before but had not found anything definitive. The area near the restroom was a blind spot, not fully covered by the cameras. They promised to increase patrols in the area, but beyond that there was little they could do unless something else happened. I thanked them, even though the news made me feel more alone than ever. I decided to be proactive. I changed all my online passwords, updated privacy settings on my social media, and removed personal information wherever I could. I even contacted my phone company to set up additional security measures on my account. If someone was trying to intimidate me or track me, I was going to make it as hard as possible for them. Weeks passed without any new incidents. Gradually, my nerves began to settle, and life returned to a cautious version of normal. I stayed alert, but the constant fear began to fade. I told myself that maybe it had been a sick prank by someone who had seen my name somewhere online. Maybe it was not as personal as it had felt in the moment. Still, the experience changed me. I became more careful about where I went, who I spoke to, and what information I shared. I learned to trust my instincts, to act when something felt wrong instead of brushing it off. The world was not as safe as I had once believed, but that knowledge made me stronger rather than weaker. Over time, I reclaimed my sense of peace. I refused to let fear control my life or stop me from doing the things I loved. I visited new places, made new friends, and embraced the freedom of living on my own terms. I remembered the fear, but I did not let it define me. It became a part of my story, a reminder of my resilience and courage. In the end, I found strength I never knew I had. I stood taller, spoke louder, and walked with more confidence than ever before. No carved name in a restroom stall could take that away from me. My life moved forward, full of new experiences and the unshakable knowledge that I could face whatever came my way. Story 8. Being a camp counselor was something I had looked forward to for years. I loved the idea of spending a whole summer outdoors leading activities and helping kids make memories. The camp had a long history and was located deep in the woods far away from the noise of the city. Every counselor went through a week of training before the campers arrived. We were taught safety procedures, activity planning, and how to handle any emergencies that might happen. When the campers finally showed up, the energy around the camp was incredible. Laughter echoed through the trees, and the smell of campfires filled the air every evening. My group of campers was a handful, but they were a good bunch, always excited for hikes, swimming, and arts and crafts. Nights were quieter, with counselors rotating shifts for night watch, ensuring that the kids were safe and accounted for. The first few weeks passed without any real problems, and I started to settle into a routine. One night, during my turn on night watch, I heard a noise near the tents that sounded out of place. It was not the usual rustling of sleeping campers or small animals in the underbrush. I brushed it off at first, thinking maybe one of the kids had gotten up to use the bathroom. But when I walked a little closer, I thought I saw a shadow slipping into one of the tents. I froze for a moment, unsure if my tired mind was playing tricks on me. Deciding not to jump to conclusions, I waited quietly nearby, listening. A few minutes later, I saw the figure exit the tent and move silently between the trees. My heart raced as I realized it was not a camper. The person was too tall, too large to be one of the kids. I decided to report it to the camp director in the morning, not wanting to cause panic during the night without proof. The next morning, I approached the camp director privately and explained what I had seen. They listened carefully but seemed skeptical, suggesting it might have been another counselor checking on the kids. I was told to keep an eye out but not to worry too much unless it happened again. I left the office feeling uneasy, wondering if I had imagined the whole thing after all. Still, I could not shake the feeling that something was wrong. Over the next few nights, I stayed extra alert during my shifts. I checked on the campers more often, making sure they were all safe and accounted for. Then, 2 nights later, I saw it happen again. This time, the figure moved between 2 different tents, crouching low and slipping inside briefly before moving to the next one. I decided to follow from a safe distance, staying hidden among the trees. I watched as the figure eventually left the tents and made their way toward the staff cabins. I could not see their face clearly in the darkness, but I recognized the shape and the way they moved. It was one of the older staff members, someone who had been working at the camp for years. The next morning, I went straight to the director again, this time insisting that we check the security logs. The camp had a few trail cameras set up near the main paths for wildlife observation and security. Together, we reviewed the footage from the past few nights. Sure enough, there were images of the older staff member moving around the camper areas long after lights out without any official reason. The director's face grew serious as they realized the gravity of the situation. Authorities were contacted immediately, and the staff member was removed from the camp that same day. Parents were informed and extra security measures were put in place to reassure everyone that their children were safe. Counselors were instructed to double up for night watches, and staff meetings became more frequent to ensure communication stayed open. The campers were not told the full details, only that a staff member had left for personal reasons, and that new rules were in place to keep the camp safe. I noticed the atmosphere change slightly. Counselors were more protective, more aware of where everyone was at all times. The camp director personally thanked me for speaking up and staying vigilant, even when my concerns had been doubted at first. As the summer continued, the camp gradually regained its joyful spirit. Campfires were filled with songs and stories again, and the kids returned to their carefree adventures. I felt a deep sense of responsibility every time I looked around at the smiling faces of the campers. I knew how important it was to trust instincts and to always speak up when something felt wrong. By the end of the summer, I had built strong bonds with the campers and my fellow counselors. We had overcome the challenge together and made the camp a better, safer place. During the closing ceremony, as we said goodbye to the kids and their families, I felt proud of the work we had done. I realized that being a counselor was about more than just fun activities. It was about being a protector, a role model, and someone the campers could trust without question. The experience stayed with me long after I packed up my things and left the campgrounds. It taught me to trust my instincts, even when others might hesitate. It showed me the importance of speaking out for those who cannot always speak for themselves. And most of all, it reminded me that doing the right thing is not always easy, but it is always worth it. I promised myself that no matter where life took me, I would always carry that lesson forward. Story 9. Well, it had been a few days since I decided to upgrade the safety features in my home. After reading about the importance of having working smoke detectors, I ordered a new one online from a store that had good reviews. It arrived in a small box neatly packed with instructions and mounting hardware. I figured it would be a quick project, something I could install without much trouble. That Saturday morning, around 10 a.m., I set to work. I chose to install it in the hallway outside my bedroom, thinking it would offer the best coverage. I grabbed my tools from the closet and followed the instructions step by step. Everything seemed straightforward, and it only took me about 15 minutes to mount it on the ceiling. Once it was up, I stood back to admire my work, feeling a little proud of myself for handling it so efficiently. I tested it using the button on the front, and a loud beep echoed through the hall, confirming it was working. For the next few days, I hardly thought about it. Life got busy with work, errands, and the usual routines. I passed under the new detector several times a day without giving it a second glance. It became just another part of the house, blending into the background like it was supposed to. But then, one evening around 8 p.m., something strange caught my attention. I was sitting on the couch, flipping through channels on the television, when I noticed a tiny red light blinking from the hallway. At first, I thought it might be a reflection, or maybe a trick of the light. I stood up and walked closer, narrowing my eyes to see better. Sure enough, a faint red light blinked from the center of the smoke detector, something I had never noticed before. Confused, I went back to the kitchen and grabbed a step stool. I positioned it under the detector and climbed up carefully. At eye level, I could now see what had been invisible from the floor. Behind the small vent holes, there was a lens, unmistakably a camera lens. My heart raced as the realization hit me. I had not installed a smoke detector. I had installed a hidden camera in my own home. For a few seconds, I just stared at it, my mind struggling to catch up with what my eyes were seeing. I thought about all the things I had done around the house since I installed it, all the moments I thought were private. A wave of anger and disgust washed over me. I climbed down, grabbed my phone, and took several photos of the device from different angles. I did not touch it any further. I backed away, feeling sick, and sat on the couch trying to think clearly. I decided to call the non-emergency police number and report what I had found. The dispatcher listened carefully and told me to stay put while they sent an officer to my house. They advised me not to tamper with the device any more than I already had. Waiting for the officer felt like an eternity. Every creak of the house made me jump. I could not help but wonder who had sent me the fake smoke detector and whether they had been watching me in real time. It was a terrifying thought, one that made my skin crawl. I kept glancing at the ceiling, half expecting it to move or make a sound. About 20 minutes later, there was a knock at the door. I checked through the peephole before opening it. The officer introduced himself and asked me to explain everything from the beginning. I showed him the photos on my phone and pointed out the device. He climbed up on the stool to inspect it himself and confirmed my suspicion. It was definitely a camera disguised as a smoke detector. The officer carefully removed the device from the ceiling and placed it into an evidence bag. He asked if I had the original packaging and receipt. I retrieved them from the kitchen drawer where I had tossed them earlier in the week. He took photos of everything and promised they would open an investigation immediately. He explained that devices like these are often sold through shady online sellers and sometimes get shipped by mistake or intentionally through third parties. He asked if I had noticed anything suspicious lately, any strange cars parked outside or unknown packages arriving. I thought hard but could not recall anything unusual. Everything had seemed normal until that blinking light. The officer recommended that I do a full sweep of the house to make sure there were no other hidden devices. He said it was rare, but it was better to be cautious. He also suggested installing a legitimate security system to protect myself moving forward. After he left, I sat down heavily on the couch, feeling a mixture of fear and relief. I spent the next few hours checking every room in the house. I looked behind picture frames, inside vents, under furniture, anywhere a small camera could be hidden. I even unscrewed the cover plates on the electrical outlets just to be thorough. Thankfully, I found no other devices. Still, the idea that someone had managed to invade my home in such a personal way left me deeply unsettled. The police kept me updated over the next few days. They traced the seller of the device and found out it had come from a disreputable supplier overseas. It appeared that my order had been intercepted somewhere along the way and replaced with the fake device. They assured me that whoever had planted the camera had not accessed any footage, as the device needed to be connected to a local network, and mine had strong encryption. Knowing that gave me some peace of mind, but I still decided to make some changes. I bought new, high-quality smoke detectors from a trusted local store and had a professional install them. I also upgraded my home security system with motion detectors, window sensors, and multiple cameras that fed into a secure app only I could access. It felt empowering to take back control over my own space. I talked to my neighbors about what had happened, and they were just as shocked as I had been. Many of them decided to check their own homes for suspicious devices, and a few even upgraded their security systems too. It felt good to know that something positive had come out of the experience, even if it had started so horribly. Weeks passed, and the fear that had clung to me began to fade. I stopped jumping at every noise, stopped feeling like invisible eyes were following me. I reclaimed my sense of safety, stronger and more determined than before. I knew now how important it was to be vigilant, to protect the sanctity of my home at all costs. The experience taught me a valuable lesson about trust and caution. Just because something seems ordinary does not mean it is. I learned to question, to verify, to take nothing for granted when it came to my personal security. I also learned that I was capable of handling even the most unsettling situations with clarity and strength. At night, when I walked through my home and saw the soft glow of the new, trustworthy detectors, I felt a deep sense of pride. I had faced a terrifying invasion of privacy and come out stronger for it. My home was truly mine again, a place of safety and peace. No blinking lights, no hidden lenses, just walls filled with laughter, quiet and life. Story 10. The family reunion had been planned for months, and everyone was excited. I had not seen some of my relatives in years, and the idea of catching up with everyone sounded wonderful. We chose a large rental house near the beach, a perfect spot for barbecues, late-night talks, and shared laughter. When I arrived, the house was already buzzing with activity, children running around, adults preparing food, and music playing softly in the background. It felt good to be there, to be part of something familiar and warm. The first night passed without any problems. We sat around a bonfire, sharing stories and reminiscing about old times. I talked with cousins I barely remembered and laughed harder than I had in months. Everyone seemed happy to be together again, and I went to bed that night feeling content. It felt like a rare moment when everything in the world aligned just right. I thought the whole weekend would carry that same joyful energy. The next morning, while helping prepare breakfast, I noticed one of the younger relatives acting strangely. They kept fiddling with their phone, hiding it quickly whenever someone came near. I brushed it off at first, thinking maybe they were just being secretive about texting friends. We were all a little attached to our phones, after all. Still, something about the way they acted kept tugging at the back of my mind. I tried not to let it bother me and focused instead on enjoying the day. We spent the afternoon at the beach, building sand castles, swimming and playing games. Everyone was relaxed and having fun, but I kept catching glimpses of the same relative lurking nearby, phone in hand. They seemed less interested in participating and more focused on whatever was happening on their screen. I mentioned it casually to another cousin, who shrugged it off and joked that teenagers were just glued to their devices. I laughed along but still felt uneasy. Later that evening, while most people were outside grilling, I stayed back inside to help set the tables. I passed by a side room, noticed the same relative sitting alone, hunched over a laptop connected to their phone. Curiosity got the better of me, and I watched for a moment from the hallway. What I saw made my stomach drop. On the screen were dozens of video files, each labeled with different names and timestamps from throughout the reunion. At first, I could not believe what I was seeing. I stepped closer, pretending to tidy up nearby so I could get a better look. It was clear they had been secretly recording conversations, some in private moments when people thought no one else was around. I felt a wave of anger and betrayal wash over me. This was supposed to be a safe, private gathering of family, not something to be turned into a collection of hidden recordings. I knew I could not stay silent about it. I backed away quietly and went outside to find a few of the older relatives. Pulling them aside, I explained what I had seen, trying to stay calm even though my heart was racing. Their faces darkened as I spoke, and they agreed we needed to address it immediately. We gathered a few more family members and approached the relative inside. I felt nervous confronting them, but I knew it had to be done. When we entered the room, they looked up, startled and defensive. We asked them calmly but firmly about the videos and why they had been recording conversations without anyone's permission. They stammered, offering excuses about making memories and wanting to create a documentary of the family. No one was buying it. It was one thing to take candid photos, another entirely to secretly record private talks. We demanded they delete every single video file in front of us. After some protesting, they finally agreed, opening the laptop and showing the files being dragged into the trash and permanently erased. It was not easy to watch, knowing how many moments had been captured without consent. Some people were visibly upset, others simply stunned into silence. The damage was already done, and the trust that had been broken hung heavy in the air. Afterward, we held a family meeting to discuss what had happened. We emphasized the importance of privacy, trust, and respect within the family. Everyone agreed that boundaries had been crossed, and steps needed to be taken to prevent anything like this from happening again. It was a tough conversation, but a necessary one. We decided that for the rest of the reunion, phones and recording devices would be limited to certain public areas only. The next day felt a little awkward at first, but slowly, the tension began to lift. We focused on making real memories the right way, with shared experiences instead of sneaky recordings. We spent the day playing board games, cooking together, and sitting by the water, talking about our dreams and plans for the future. Genuine laughter returned, and even though the wound was still fresh, there was a sense of healing happening. I found myself appreciating the honest conversations more than ever, with knowing that what was said stayed between us made everything feel more genuine. The trust we rebuilt over those next few days was hard-earned but stronger because of it. I was proud of how everyone handled the situation with maturity and compassion. It would have been easy to let anger ruin the whole weekend, but we chose to come together instead. Before the reunion ended, we gathered for a final group photo by the beach. This time everyone was fully aware, smiling naturally as the camera clicked. It felt symbolic, a way of reclaiming the meaning of capturing memories, done with respect and love. As we hugged goodbye and promised to stay in touch, I realized that even the difficult moments had strengthened our bond. We had faced something uncomfortable together and emerged better for it. On the drive home, I reflected on everything that had happened. It reminded me that family, like anything important, takes effort, patience, and forgiveness. Our mistakes will happen, but how we respond defines who we are. I felt grateful for the resilience we had shown, for the way we had prioritized understanding over anger. In the end, the reunion had been a true gathering of hearts, with lessons that would stay with me for a long time. Back at home, I stayed in close contact with the relatives I had reconnected with. We shared more calls, visits, and real conversations without the shadow of secrecy. It felt good to have that deeper connection, built on honesty and mutual respect. What had started as a violation had turned into an opportunity to strengthen the ties that mattered most. I knew future reunions would be even better because of the lessons we had learned. Story 11. I was browsing through a local garage sale one Saturday morning, searching for something to add to my collection of vintage knickknacks. It was the usual kind of sale, with old furniture, dusty boxes of books, and various forgotten items cluttered on tables. I loved sifting through these things, imagining where they had been, what stories they held. As I was picking through a box of old trinkets, something caught my eye, a thick, leather-bound photo album. The cover was worn and faded, but something about it seemed inviting. I picked it up and started flipping through the pages. The photos were a mixture of black and white and sepia-toned images, some from decades ago, others from more recent years. I found pictures of people I didn't recognize, images of family gatherings, birthday parties, and vacations. There was a sense of nostalgia in every picture, even if I couldn't place the faces. But then, on the last page, I found something that made my heart skip a beat. It was a photo of a house, an old 2-story building that looked eerily familiar. The house in the photo was the house I had grown up in. I stopped flipping through the album, staring at the image in disbelief. My childhood home, the one I had not seen in years, was right there in front of me, captured in a moment frozen in time. The house was older in the photo, with peeling paint on the porch and overgrown ivy creeping up the sides. But it was unmistakably the same house, the same front yard where I used to play as a child. My mind raced with questions. How did this photo end up in a random album at a garage sale? I turned the photo over, hoping to find some clue, a name, a date, anything that might explain how it came to be there. But there was nothing. Just a blank, faded back, as if the photo had been stripped of its history. The silence around me felt heavier, the sounds of the garage sale fading into the background as I became fixated on the image. There was something haunting about it, something unsettling about finding my childhood home in a place so far from where it belonged. I quickly closed the album and stood up, clutching the photo in my hands. My mind was racing, torn between the urge to run and the need to understand what was happening. I scanned the yard around me, searching for the elderly woman who was running the sale. But she was standing by a table, chatting with another customer, but when I caught her eye, she gave me a curious look. I hesitated before walking up to her. "Excuse me," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I found this photo in the album. It's of a house, my childhood home. Do you know anything about it?" The woman looked at the photo, then back at me, her expression unreadable. She seemed to pause for a moment before speaking. "I don't know much about it," she said slowly. "I just buy old things and put them up for sale. That album came from a box of things I bought from an estate sale a few weeks ago." My heart dropped. An estate sale? The idea of someone's belongings being sold off like that, without any real connection to their past, unsettled me. But I didn't press her for more information. Instead, I just nodded, thanking her before I turned to leave. As I walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to the photo, something I needed to understand. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about the house in the picture. It had always been a place of comfort for me growing up, filled with memories of my family, my childhood. But as I studied the photo again, I noticed something strange. For in the background of the image, just barely visible, was a figure standing by the fence. It was too blurry to make out any real details, but the shape seemed familiar, and it sent a chill down my spine. I couldn't place it, but I felt like I had seen that person before. But where? And why was this figure included in a photo of my childhood home? The next day, I decided to drive by my old house. It had been years since I last visited the area, and I wasn't sure what I would find. I drove slowly down the familiar street, my heart pounding as I neared the block where my childhood home had been. As I turned the corner, I almost didn't recognize it. The house was still there, but it looked different. The ivy had been trimmed back, the porch was newly painted, and the yard had been landscaped. It was as if the house had been revitalized, restored to a pristine version of itself. But something about it felt wrong. The house was too perfect, too well kept. It didn't feel like the home I remembered. I parked across the street and stared at it for a long time, my mind racing with unanswered questions. Who had renovated it? Why had it been changed so drastically? And why did I still feel like something was off? I gathered the courage to approach the house. The driveway was empty, and no one appeared to be home. As I walked closer, I noticed a small plaque next to the front door. It was old, weathered, and engraved with a name I didn't recognize. The name meant nothing to me, but the presence of the plaque only deepened the mystery. It was as if this house, my childhood home, had become someone else's. The memories I had of it seemed to be fading, slipping away with every passing moment. I reached for the doorbell, but then hesitated. Was it even appropriate for me to ring the doorbell? Would I seem like a stranger, trespassing on a place that no longer belonged to me? I stepped back, feeling a mixture of unease and frustration. As I turned to leave, I caught something out of the corner of my eye. A shadow flickered in one of the upstairs windows, as if someone was watching me. I froze, my heart racing again. I stood there, staring at the window, trying to convince myself that it was just my imagination. But then the shadow moved, and I felt a jolt of recognition. It was the same figure from the photo. My breath caught in my throat. Had I been followed? Was this person somehow connected to the photo, to the mysterious album? What did they want? I hurried back to my car, my mind a whirlwind of questions and fear. As I drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see someone following me. But there was nothing. The street was empty, and the house slowly disappeared from view. The only thing left was the lingering sense that something had changed, something I couldn't explain. Later that night, I sat in my living room, staring at the photo of my childhood home. The figure in the background had become an obsession. I couldn't shake the feeling that they were tied to something in my past that I had forgotten. I knew I needed answers, but I wasn't sure if I was ready for the truth. I had been hoping to find something comforting, some connection to the past. But now I wasn't so sure anymore. Story 12. I wasn't really the type to go to parties, but when I was invited to a pool party by someone I knew through work, I thought it might be a good chance to meet new people and have some fun. The invite seemed harmless enough: come for the pool, stay for the drinks, and just have a good time. It wasn't something I'd usually say yes to, but I figured it would be a break from the usual routine. I debated for a bit, but finally decided to go. The weather was perfect, and I thought maybe a change of pace would do me some good. I arrived at the house around 8 p.m., greeted by loud music and laughter spilling from the open patio doors. The host, a person I'd only spoken to a few times at work, smiled and waved as he welcomed me inside. The house was large, modern, and had an impressive pool area. People were gathered in groups, some lounging by the pool, others in the water, and a few sitting around tables with drinks. The atmosphere felt relaxed, yet there was a buzz of excitement in the air. I slipped into the pool area and joined a few people who were sitting on the edge with their feet in the water. Everyone seemed friendly enough, and I began to feel more at ease. Drinks were being passed around, and people were chatting about everything from work to recent movies. But the night was warm, and the soft glow of the lights reflected off the water, making everything seem almost dreamlike. I wasn't sure how much time had passed, but I was starting to enjoy myself more than I expected. Around 10 p.m., the music shifted to something quieter, and the host made a sudden announcement. He stood by the pool, clinking a glass to get everyone's attention. "All right, everyone, I know we're having a good time, but I've got something special planned for tonight," he said with a grin. It wasn't uncommon for party hosts to have a surprise or two, so I didn't think much of it at first. But the way he said it made me feel like something more unusual was about to happen. He went on to explain that for the next few hours we would all be part of a bonding experience where we weren't allowed to leave or make any phone calls until 3 a.m. At first I thought it was a joke, maybe some sort of quirky game or team-building exercise. But as he looked around the room, his expression didn't change. It was clear he was serious. No one leaves, no one calls anyone. "If you need something, come to me, and we'll handle it," he said firmly. There was a moment of silence, followed by murmurs among the guests. I felt uneasy. It seemed a little strange to impose such a rule on a social event, and I wasn't sure if it was part of the vibe of the party or if the host was just being weird. A few people seemed uncomfortable, but most went along with it. After all, it was just a few hours, right? Still, the thought of being stuck at a party for hours with no contact to the outside world felt unnerving. The more I thought about it, the less I liked the idea. But everyone else seemed to be shrugging it off, so I did the same and tried to relax again. As the evening wore on, the rules seemed to become more ingrained. The host and his friends began patrolling the exits, making sure no one could leave without permission. I watched as some people tried to step outside for a breath of fresh air, only to be ushered back inside by the host's staff. It was as if the energy of the party shifted from carefree fun to something much more controlled. I noticed that a few people who had been drinking seemed to have started to get frustrated by the restriction, but no one spoke up. It was nearing midnight, and the poolside had grown quieter. Some people had retreated inside to the living room, where the atmosphere had become more subdued. There was still music playing, but it was much softer now. A few people were playing cards, while others sat on the couches in silence, probably wondering what was going on. My stomach churned as I glanced around, feeling increasingly uneasy about the whole situation. I had an overwhelming urge to leave, but something was stopping me. The thought of the host's strict rules kept echoing in my mind. Around 1 a.m., the tension in the air had become palpable. People had started to speak in hushed tones, and a few looked like they were trying to discreetly send text messages. But whenever the host caught anyone on their phone, he would quickly step in and take the device, reminding them of the rules. I couldn't help but feel trapped. I thought about trying to sneak a call or send a message to someone outside, but the idea of getting caught and facing the host's wrath kept me from making the move. It was starting to feel less like a party and more like an experiment. By 2 a.m., I could feel the walls closing in. A group of people near the pool had started to get restless, exchanging glances that were full of unease. I overheard a conversation between two people discussing whether they could somehow leave or if they had to wait until 3 a.m. It was clear that others were beginning to feel the same way I did. The excitement of the party had long since evaporated, and now we were all just stuck in this weird situation with no clear way out. I decided that I couldn't take it anymore. I walked toward the host, who was standing by the door, watching everyone carefully. I wasn't sure what I was going to say, but I knew I needed to leave. As I approached, he turned and smiled, his eyes gleaming with an almost unsettling intensity. "Everything all right?" he asked, as if everything was perfectly normal. My stomach twisted, but I smiled and nodded, trying to hide my growing panic. "I was just wondering," I began, "if we could leave before 3 a.m.? I have to get up early tomorrow." He gave me a knowing look, and for a moment I thought he was going to dismiss me. But then he leaned in slightly, his smile widening. "You can leave whenever you want, of course," he said, but the way he said it made me feel like there was an underlying threat hidden beneath his words. "But remember, once you leave, you're leaving behind the experience. You won't be part of what happens after 3 a.m. His words sent a chill through me. I wasn't sure what he meant, but the way he said it sounded ominous. I backed away slowly, trying to hide the anxiety I was feeling. The last thing I wanted was to get into some sort of confrontation, so I decided to wait it out. But the idea of staying until 3 a.m., trapped in this strange environment, was becoming unbearable. As the clock ticked toward the witching hour, I decided I had had enough. At 2:50 a.m., I grabbed my things and made my way toward the door, trying to move quietly through the crowd. The host's eyes followed me, but he didn't stop me this time. When I stepped outside, the fresh air hit me like a wave of relief. I didn't look back as I hurried to my car and drove off, not stopping until I was miles away. When I finally got home, I realized how fortunate I was to have escaped. I had no idea what kind of experience the host had been offering, but I was certain it wasn't something I wanted to be a part of. I felt like I had narrowly avoided something much worse. The next day, I heard rumors that the host had been known for pulling strange stunts like this in the past, and I was grateful I had trusted my instincts to leave when I did. I'd never attend another party like that again, no matter the invitation. Story 13. It was supposed to be a quick and relaxing session. After a long day, I had decided to unwind in the gym sauna. It was part of my usual routine. A few minutes in the dry heat always helped me clear my mind and ease away the stress. I walked into the sauna, the warm air wrapping around me, and closed the door behind me. The quiet hum of the air conditioning outside and the subtle smell of wood inside created a peaceful ambience. I didn't think much of it when I noticed the gym was almost empty that evening. There were only a couple of people in the workout area, and the front desk was quiet. It felt peaceful in a way, almost like I had the place to myself. I sat down on the wooden bench, leaning back to relax, letting the warmth from the sauna sink into my muscles. It was just a typical day, nothing out of the ordinary. But as time passed, I started feeling a little more heat than I was used to. At first, I thought it was just my body adjusting, but it kept getting warmer, much warmer. The heat began to feel almost suffocating. I opened my eyes and glanced toward the small window, but the dim light inside the sauna made it hard to gauge how much time had passed. I figured I'd leave soon, but it wasn't unbearable yet. As the minutes dragged on, I found myself becoming uncomfortable. The warmth that had once felt soothing was now oppressive, making my skin feel hot and sticky. I tried to ignore it, assuming it was just my imagination. But then I realized the temperature was rising steadily, and it wasn't the usual dry heat I was accustomed to. It was becoming dangerously hot, almost uncomfortably so. I stood up to open the door, but it didn't budge. The handle wouldn't turn. My pulse quickened as I pushed harder against the door, trying to force it open. Panic slowly began to creep in. How was I locked in here? I looked around, searching for something, anything that could explain why the door was stuck. I tried pressing the button near the wall that was supposed to alert someone, but nothing happened. The heat kept climbing. It wasn't just uncomfortable now, it was starting to feel like I was being baked alive. My breath became short, and I could feel myself sweating more than usual. The air felt thicker, heavier, and it was getting harder to breathe. Every time I tried to focus on staying calm, my mind spiraled further into panic. I knocked on the door, hoping someone would hear me and come to my aid. But no one came. The sauna room felt smaller as the temperature rose, and it felt like the walls were closing in. My skin flushed red from the heat, and I could feel myself becoming dizzy. The thought of staying inside much longer became unbearable. I started banging on the door with both fists, shouting, but the sound barely echoed over the constant hum of the sauna's heat. I couldn't hear anything outside, and I had no idea if anyone was even aware that I was trapped. My phone, left in my locker, seemed like an eternity away. I remembered hearing about the dangers of extreme heat and how quickly things could escalate, but I didn't want to panic. But the longer I stayed in the sauna, the more real my fear became. It felt like a fight against time and my own body's growing discomfort. Desperation began to set in, and I forced myself to stay calm, but the situation was quickly becoming life-threatening. I knew that if I didn't find a way out soon, I could be seriously harmed. I attempted the door again, this time with all my strength, but it still wouldn't open. It was as though something was actively preventing me from leaving. My mind raced, trying to think of any way to escape. Could I break the glass? Could I signal for help through the window? But there was nothing I could do. The sauna's temperature had reached unbearable levels, and my body was starting to react. I felt faint, my vision starting to blur as the heat overwhelmed me. My breath became shallow, and I felt a tingling sensation in my arms and legs. My body was overheating faster than I could control. I knew I had to do something before it was too late. With the last bit of energy I had, I made one more attempt to force open the door. I slammed my shoulder against it, but it barely budged. I was running out of time. The heat was becoming suffocating. I felt lightheaded and dizzy, struggling to hold on to any sense of awareness. Every movement felt sluggish, and my heart raced as I realized just how close I was to losing consciousness. Just as I thought I could take no more, I heard a distant sound. The faint click of a door opening. Someone was finally coming. I mustered all the strength I had left, shouting, banging on the door again, desperate for help. I tried to focus on the sound, praying it wasn't just my mind playing tricks on me. And then, like a lifeline, I heard a voice calling out, telling me they had found the problem. Someone had finally noticed I was trapped. The door opened, and the rush of cooler air was a relief like nothing I had ever felt. I staggered out of the sauna, my body trembling from the shock of the heat and my close call. The staff member who had come to my aid quickly guided me to a nearby bench, offering me water and checking to make sure I was okay. My skin was beet red and I could barely stand, but I was alive. I tried to gather my thoughts, still processing what had just happened. The staff member explained that the sauna's temperature controls had malfunctioned and someone had turned up the heat all the way. It wasn't intentional, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The heat had been turned up to extreme levels, far beyond what should have been safe. The situation felt almost too deliberate, too too dangerous for it to have been just an accident. In the days that followed, I received an apology from the gym management. They assured me that the issue had been fixed, and they offered me a free membership as compensation. But no amount of apologies could erase the fear I had felt. The close call had shaken me more than I realized, and I couldn't shake the suspicion that someone might have been involved in intentionally locking me in. I thought about it constantly, trying to rationalize everything that had happened. Perhaps it had been a mistake, a simple malfunction, but the timing was odd. What if someone had noticed I was in there and decided to play a dangerous prank? The possibilities ran through my mind, and I couldn't help but feel uneasy every time I walked into the gym. In the end, I decided to take a break from the sauna. I couldn't shake the memory of the suffocating heat and the panic that set in when I realized I was trapped. I had survived, but the fear and uncertainty lingered. I didn't want to live in constant fear, but I also knew I would never forget that feeling of being trapped, helpless, and close to losing everything. It was a reminder of how quickly things could go wrong, how a simple trip to the gym could have turned into something far more dangerous. Story 14. It had been a slow day, so I was casually browsing through some local listings when I came across a missing pet flyer posted online. The message was urgent, describing a small black and white cat that had gone missing a few days prior. The owner left their contact information, offering a reward for anyone who could help find their pet. I figured I might as well keep an eye out, and I saved the flyer, not thinking much of it. The next morning I was out running errands when I saw the same flyer pinned to a telephone pole in the neighborhood. The cat's picture looked so familiar. I had seen a similar cat roaming near my house a few days ago. Without thinking, I reached out to the number listed on the flyer, asking if the cat had been found. I didn't expect to hear anything back right away, but I was hoping my quick observation might help. To my surprise, I received a reply within an hour. The person thanked me for reaching out and seemed eager for any information I could provide. I told them I had seen a cat matching the description recently near my home, and I was wondering if they were still looking for it. The person seemed hopeful, and they asked me if I could check around my area for the missing animal. I agreed, planning to take a walk later that day to see if I could spot it again. Later that afternoon, I set out with a sense of purpose. I walked through the neighborhood, my eyes scanning every bush and tree. I had hoped to spot the cat again so I could help reunite it with its owner. After about an hour, I found nothing. I decided to head back home and report my findings. When I called, I told the person I hadn't found the cat, but I would keep an eye out. I didn't expect what happened next. They immediately asked me if I was sure the cat wasn't with me. Confused, I said that I didn't have the cat and had just been looking around. The person grew increasingly insistent, accusing me of hiding their pet. I was taken aback. Why would I have your cat? I asked, trying to stay calm. I just saw a cat that looked like the one in your flyer, and I thought I could help. But they were adamant, repeating that I had the cat and that I was refusing to return it. I felt my stomach tighten. The accusation was so strange and unfounded. I tried to explain that I didn't have the animal, but it was clear they didn't believe me. They said they had been checking the neighborhood and were certain the cat had been in my yard recently. The entire conversation began to feel more like an interrogation than an attempt to find a lost pet. I spent the rest of the evening trying to shake off the conversation. It was unsettling to think someone might believe I was hiding their cat, especially when I had no idea what they were talking about. Still, I decided I would do the right thing and look around again. I checked my yard and the surrounding area, but I saw no sign of any cat. Everything seemed normal. The next day I tried calling the person again to update them, hoping they would see reason. When I called, they picked up right away, but their tone had changed. Now they were accusing me of deliberately lying. They said I knew exactly where their cat was and that I was deliberately keeping it from them. I tried to explain that I didn't even have the cat, let alone hide it. But the person was relentless, saying things like, "I know it's you. I can feel it. Why won't you just admit it?" This went on for a few more days, with them calling at all hours, demanding I tell them where the cat was. They were becoming more aggressive, sending messages late into the night, accusing me of things I hadn't done. I tried to ignore the calls and messages, but the persistence wore me down. I started feeling like I was being watched, even though I knew that was impossible. It was a strange growing paranoia that crept into my life. Finally, I decided to take action. I contacted the local authorities to explain the situation. They told me that the person was likely going through a difficult time and suggested I document everything. The more I thought about it, the more I realized this person wasn't just worried about a missing pet. Something about their behavior felt off, like they were projecting something onto me, something that wasn't real. I kept a detailed record of the calls and messages, making sure to report every instance of harassment. The police said they would check in on the situation, but I felt like I was caught in a never-ending loop. It wasn't just about a missing pet anymore. It was about someone who had turned their fear and desperation into accusations that felt more personal than anything else. One evening, after another series of increasingly strange messages, I received a knock on my door. I opened it to find a man standing there, someone I hadn't seen before. He asked if I had seen a black and white cat, and when I said I hadn't, he seemed disappointed but not surprised. He explained that he was the pet owner's brother and had come by to talk in person. The conversation was tense, but he seemed more reasonable than the person I had been talking to. He apologized for the strange phone calls and messages, explaining that his sibling had been under a lot of stress lately due to personal issues. The cat was, in fact, missing, and his sibling had become obsessed with finding it. But it was clear that their obsession had led them to make wild accusations without thinking clearly. After we spoke, I felt a sense of relief, though I also felt sad for the person who had gone through so much that they couldn't see reason. The brother promised he would speak to them about how their behavior had affected others and try to get them some help. I appreciated the apology, but the entire experience had left me shaken. In the days that followed, the calls stopped. The person never reached out again, and I never saw the cat. I don't know what happened to it, but I hope it found its way home. I also hope the person received the support they needed to work through their distress. But as for me, I learned an important lesson about compassion and the complexities of human emotions. Sometimes fear can drive people to do and say things they wouldn't normally do, but that doesn't make it any less hurtful. And while I was glad the situation was resolved, I couldn't help but feel a lingering sadness for the person who had once thought I was hiding their beloved pet. Story 15. I had worked at the diner for months, a place that never really slept. The night crowd was usually a mix of truck drivers, insomniacs, and anyone else who needed something warm to fill the void of their late hours. The diner was small, with cracked vinyl booths and a counter that creaked with every movement. Despite the simple setup, it had a certain charm, and I had become a regular part of its heartbeat. It was just another night, the usual hum of clinking silverware and soft chatter filling the air as I wiped down tables and took orders. The night had started like any other. I was stationed behind the counter, flipping pancakes, stirring coffee, and making sure the kitchen ran smoothly. The diner had a cozy, almost melancholic vibe at night. The lights were always a little dim, the hum of the fridge in the back providing a steady soundtrack. At around 2 a.m., the diner had a lull, where customers slowly filtered out, and the ones who remained kept to themselves. I was used to this quiet time, knowing it was only a matter of hours before the morning rush would begin. It was during this quiet period that I noticed him. He was seated in a booth near the back, hunched over a piece of paper. I couldn't make out what he was doing, but he was scribbling quickly. There was something about his presence that felt odd, almost out of place, though I couldn't quite put my finger on it. I went about my business, delivering coffee refills and checking on other tables, but every now and then I glanced in his direction. His focus was entirely on the paper, his pen moving in swift, deliberate strokes. When he stood to leave, I didn't think much of it. It was late, and I was busy cleaning the counter. He slipped out quietly, barely making a sound as he walked past me and out the door. It was only after he left that I noticed the napkin left behind on the table, crumpled but still somewhat intact. I picked it up, intending to toss it, when I saw the drawing. It was a rough sketch of my face, though distorted in a way that made it unsettling. The eyes were exaggerated, the features too sharp, almost too intense. And beneath the drawing, in thick, hurried letters, was a single word: soon. A chill ran down my spine as I stared at the napkin. It was so simple, so vague, that the word soon left me uneasy. It wasn't the first time someone had drawn or written strange things at the diner, but this felt different. I couldn't help but wonder if I had somehow been targeted. What did it mean? Was it a threat, or just some strange coincidence? I shoved the napkin into my pocket, trying to push the feeling away, but I couldn't shake it. For the next few hours, I couldn't stop thinking about the drawing. I tried to distract myself with work, but the word kept echoing in my mind. Soon for what? I tried to brush it off as some weird random thing, but my instincts told me something was off. I was alone in the diner at this time of night, and the thought that someone might be watching me made my skin crawl. The napkin felt like a sign, though I wasn't sure what it was a sign of. By the time my shift ended at 6 a.m., I was exhausted but unsettled. I didn't know how to interpret the drawing, and that lack of clarity gnawed at me. I left the diner, locking the door behind me and heading to my car. I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting someone to be following me, but there was nothing. The streets were empty, the world outside quiet and dark. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I told myself it was nothing, just a weird coincidence, but it didn't feel that way. The following days were a blur of fatigue and anxiety. I tried to forget about the napkin, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw the drawing again, the unsettling face, the word soon haunting me. I started to feel like I was being watched, though I couldn't pinpoint why. Every time I heard a car drive by or saw a figure in the distance, my heart would race. My mind began to play tricks on me, and I found myself double-checking the locks on my door at night and glancing over my shoulder whenever I went out. Then a week later, it happened again. I was working the late shift once more when I saw him. The man from before, sitting at the same booth in the back, scribbling on a napkin. My heart skipped a beat as I saw him glance up, locking eyes with me for a brief moment before quickly looking away. I tried to act normal, refilling coffee cups and chatting with customers, but every time I passed his booth, my gaze would flicker to the napkin he was writing on. It felt like something was building up, like some inevitable moment was approaching. As the night wore on, the diner slowly emptied, and he remained, still hunched over the napkin. I was getting more and more anxious, my hands shaking as I wiped down tables and cleared plates. Finally, he stood up to leave, as quietly as before, and I breathed a small sigh of relief. But then I saw it. He had left another napkin behind. This time there was no drawing, but the word soon was written again, more boldly, more definitively. I felt a jolt of fear. I had no idea what it meant, but it didn't feel like a coincidence anymore. I looked at the clock. It was nearly 3 a.m. My shift was almost over, and the thought of staying in the diner alone with that feeling creeping over me made my skin crawl. I grabbed the napkin and stuffed it into my pocket, hoping the next few minutes would pass quickly. As the last customer left, I locked the doors and went into the back to prepare for closing. But before I could get too far, I heard a soft knock on the window. My heart raced as I turned to see the man standing outside, looking at me with that same intense stare. He didn't wave, didn't gesture, just stood there. I couldn't tell if he was waiting for something or if he was just watching me. A cold sweat broke out on the back of my neck, and for the first time in a long while I felt truly afraid. I backed away from the window slowly, my mind racing with what to do next. I had no idea if he had any ill intentions, but the feeling in my gut told me something was wrong. I grabbed my phone, hands shaking, and dialed 911. The dispatcher answered immediately, and I quickly explained the situation, asking them to send someone over. I wasn't sure what he wanted, but I didn't want to take any chances. By the time the police arrived, the man had disappeared, leaving no trace of where he went. The officers searched the area around the diner, but he was nowhere to be found. They advised me to stay alert and promised to keep an eye on things for the next few nights. They also took a report on the incident and told me to call if anything else happened. I never saw him again, but the unease lingered. I kept working at the diner, but I was always looking over my shoulder, always checking for signs that something wasn't right. The word soon never left my mind, but over time the fear faded, replaced by a quiet vigilance. I continued to do my job, but the experience taught me to never ignore my instincts. It was a reminder that not all things were as they seemed, and sometimes the most unsettling things could be left behind on the smallest of napkins. Story 16. The sun was still low in the sky when I met up with the group at the trailhead. There were a few familiar faces, but mostly I didn't know anyone. Hiking had always been a peaceful way for me to connect with nature, to clear my head and enjoy some solitude while being part of a shared experience. That day the air was fresh, crisp with the promise of a warm afternoon, and the trail was framed by tall trees that whispered in the breeze. I felt excited and ready for the adventure. The group leader, a person who had led hikes before, gave a brief introduction and explained the planned route. It was a moderate trail, not too strenuous, but long enough to give us a good workout and plenty of scenic views. Everyone seemed eager, chatting excitedly as we began walking. We started off together, moving at a steady pace, and I was content to listen to the sounds of the forest as we walked deeper into the wilderness. As we walked, I found myself beside someone I hadn't met before. They were quiet at first, but gradually they started up a conversation. I was glad for the company. They seemed friendly, asking about my past hiking experiences and sharing some of their own stories. We fell into an easy rhythm, walking side by side, talking about everything from favorite trails to the best camping spots. A few hours into the hike, we reached a fork in the trail. Most of the group stopped to take a break, but this person beside me suggested we go off the main path for a more scenic route. They seemed so confident about it, their voice calm and reassuring. I was hesitant at first, but the thought of seeing something new, something not everyone else was experiencing, was too tempting to ignore. I agreed, figuring it would be a short detour, and we'd rejoin the group soon enough. The path we took was narrower, overgrown with brush, and not marked on the map the leader had handed out. But the person leading me was quick, moving ahead with purpose. At first I thought it was just an alternate path that the group leader hadn't mentioned, maybe a shortcut or a hidden spot known to the more experienced hikers. The surroundings were beautiful in a wild, untouched way, and I began to relax into the peace of being away from the group. We continued on for what felt like a while, but the trail started to disappear. I noticed that we hadn't seen anyone else in a while, and the distant sounds of the group faded. I asked if we were going to catch up with them soon, but the person just smiled and said that the best views were further ahead. I wasn't entirely convinced, but I didn't want to seem overly cautious or spoil the mood. So, I kept walking, trying to enjoy the moment. The trail became increasingly difficult to follow. We were climbing up rocky terrain, pushing through thick vegetation. The person ahead seemed unbothered, leading the way as if they knew exactly where they were going. I, on the other hand, began to feel a sense of unease. Something wasn't right. The path had become almost non-existent, and I hadn't seen a single marker in a long time. When I mentioned that we should turn back, the person responded coolly, saying that we were close to a hidden viewpoint that was worth the effort. They reassured me that we'd be back on track in no time. My instincts were screaming at me to stop, to turn around, but I didn't want to be rude or seem paranoid. I followed them, even as a tight knot of anxiety began to form in my stomach. There was no clear reason to be worried yet, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was getting further from where I should be. We climbed higher, and the trees thinned out. The landscape shifted, and I began to notice the quiet, the kind of silence that felt unnatural. I hadn't heard the group in a long time. My companion was still moving ahead, but when I called out to ask how much farther it would be, they didn't respond. I quickened my pace, catching up to them, but to my surprise, when I reached the spot where they had been, they were gone. The trail was empty. I called out, but there was no answer. The panic started to set in. The realization hit me like a wave. He was alone, completely alone in an unfamiliar part of the wilderness. I checked my phone, but of course there was no signal. I had no idea where the group was, and the only person who had been with me was now nowhere to be found. I stood there for a moment, trying to calm myself, but every instinct told me to move, to get back to where I could find help. I turned around, hoping to retrace my steps, but everything looked different now. The landmarks I had passed on the way up were no longer visible. The once familiar terrain had become an unrecognizable maze of rocks and undergrowth. I called out again, louder this time, but there was nothing. The only sounds were the distant calls of birds and the rustling of the wind. I was lost. Panic set in, but I knew I had to stay calm. I forced myself to breathe, taking slow, steady breaths. I remembered the basic survival skills I'd learned during past hikes: stay put, conserve energy, don't waste resources. But it was hard to think clearly. I wasn't just lost, he had been led off the main trail, intentionally, by someone who had disappeared without a trace. The reality of the situation felt heavier with each passing moment. I started to move cautiously, trying to follow the path I thought I had taken, but it was no use. The trees looked different, the rocks unfamiliar. I was completely turned around. I knew the only chance I had was to find my way back to the trailhead, but I had no idea in which direction that was. I tried to remember the route I had taken with the group, but the more I thought about it, the more it seemed like the memories were slipping away. Like the hike was becoming a blur. After what felt like hours, I finally stopped, exhausted and thirsty. I had no idea how far I had wandered, but I knew I needed to get help soon. The sun was starting to dip lower in the sky, and the reality of being out there alone after dark was not something I wanted to face. I found a small clearing, took a deep breath, and shouted for help, hoping someone from the group would hear me. My voice echoed through the trees, but there was no response. Just as I was about to give up and sit down, I heard the sound of footsteps in the distance. I strained to listen, my heart racing. The footsteps grew louder, and then I saw a movement figure emerging from the trees. I froze, not sure whether to feel relief or fear. But when the figure came into view, I recognized the familiar faces of the group, including the leader. The group had been searching for me, calling my name, and eventually they had heard my cries. It turned out that I had wandered much farther than I realized. The leader explained that the person who had led me off the trail was a known troublemaker, someone who had been kicked off previous hikes for similar behavior. They had probably intended to get me lost or worse, but fortunately I had managed to stay calm and find my way back. I was shaken but incredibly grateful to be found. As we made our way back to the trailhead, I couldn't help but reflect on how close I had come to something far more dangerous. I had been led off track, but my instincts had kept me alive. It was a harsh reminder of how quickly things can go wrong, but also a lesson in the importance of trusting myself, even when others try to mislead me. The hike ended with relief and gratitude, and I vowed never to let my guard down again. Story 17. Well, I had always enjoyed babysitting. It was an easy job, mostly involving keeping kids entertained and making sure they were safe while their parents were out. I had taken care of several children over the years, and I liked the routine of it all. The pay was decent, and it was always nice to know that the parents trusted me to look after their kids while they went about their evening. However, there was one night that changed my perception of babysitting forever. It started like any other evening. I arrived at the house